Welcome to BK Academy of Chess. This is Black Knight. Now, it's white to move. How should white play? It's good practice to cut off the king at the furthest point. Now, you may be saying, Black Knight, but what about Rook to F5? Well, again, like we discussed from our last video, the king is close enough. So how should white win? Exactly. Now this brings about the survey drop position. How should black play? You're finally getting it. Now I call this the survey drop position. He didn't come up with this maneuver. However, there was a game where black had his king on A1 and the white pawn was on the C file, and it was long thought to be a draw until this Spanish monk or a Spanish priest solved the winning solution, and hence he's remembered for it. And so I refer to this position as the survey drop maneuver, or the survey drop position, and that's how it's won. So how should black play? By the way, Rook to F5 is black's second best chance. His best move is king to B3. In the game, white played king to E5, which works. However, Mazalis, known for his many endgame books, found that king to D5 makes white's task easier. Now let's look at this line here. Rook to F5, check. How should white play? That's the best move. Also that he could move his king to E4 to win the position as well. Now, this is critical. How should white play? Exactly. He pushes the pawn. And if black does this, how does white play? I hope you didn't say that. We were just in the survey drop position. White was supposed to do the dance with the rook down to the F2 file to get the victory. However, many players would make this move here. So how should black play in this position? Exactly. Pin the pawn, then take it. Now let's take a look at king to C3. White pushes his king, and if black continues with bringing his king forward, it makes for an easy win. After this move, I don't really see how black can make any complications. That's why I like this as a better try. As soon as the king moves to E6 to check it with the rook, forcing the king in front of the pawns, and then continue bringing your king forward. So, in this position, if black plays the king to E5, how should white play? Now this is critical. White only has one move to get the win. And there it is. Rook to G7. It has his G pawn as a shield from black's rook, and is in position to assist the promotion of the pawn. Okay, now let's go back to the main line. And in the game, white played king to E5. And black follows now that he has the C4 square. And in the game, white played G6, which is playable. However, Mazalis suggests king to E6 as the better move. Now, if you put this on your computer, it may not show this as a win, because I have Fritz, and it took Fritz some time, but after a couple of minutes, it did suggest this as the best move. And black has rook to E1, king to F7. Critical. How how should white play? Exactly. The 2 pawns on the 6th rank, this is almost impossible to stop. And black attacks the pawn. Another critical move that you should know. He steps the king to the side where the G pawn protects it from the rook, and the king is in position to protect the pawn to help the pawn promote. Okay, so we go back to the main line where white plays G6. Now if black checks, how should white play? That's the winning move. Now I think that's why Mazelis suggests here to play king to E6, because it seems much easier than something like this. Because if the king moves to the F file like this, black can hold this position. He broadsides the king, and if white pushes the G pawn, he simply checks the king, and now if white promotes, he can take it with the rook. So how should black play here? Attacks the F pawn, so that, like I said, if white promotes the pawn, he takes with the rook, the king takes the rook, and then black takes the F pawn. However, white does have this, his final attempt. So how does black play? The pawn cannot promote, it doesn't have any support, and if the F pawn pushes, then the rook takes the G pawn, pinning the F pawn, and then he takes the F pawn. Now, if black decides to try to push the F pawn, how should black play? Of course, he checks the king, right? Then he approaches the pawn, right? The F pawn can't promote. If he tries to scamper around the side, what is black's best way to draw this position? Just sacrifices them for the 2 pawns. Okay, back to the game. So white does find the correct move, king to D6. Now how should black play this position? What gives him his best chances? Rook to G1, attacking the outside pawn. And if black plays F7, how should G pawn, checking the king? Now if the king drops down to the 7th rank, he'll pin the pawn, then take it. So this forces the king to this position. So how can black hold this position? You should get this. Remember Saavedra? Now look at the placement of the kings. We should know that we just drop the rook down to the G file. Now if white does not head his king down, check this pawn, and promotes, how does black play this position? See, these themes repeat themselves. That's why you should know these. Now guys, stick with me, because this is when the grand finale starts. It started with this move here, right? Now, black attacks the correct pawn, the outside pawn, right? Now, we already looked at this right here. Now white plays the correct move. Now what is black to do? Gains the opposition from the back. So what is black trying here? Well, if white pushes his pawn, he checks the king, forcing him back to the 7th rank, right? He takes the pawn, and the other one's pinned. Takes that on the next move, right? Now, white, we already know that white cannot support the pawn from the f7 square because black ends up taking the back pawn as soon as the rook and queen exchange on g8, right? And now the same thing happens here, right? He attacks that back pawn with his king, and he sticks with it, right? So how is white to win? This is the correct move. Now, we have this. If the rook plays here, right? How does white win? He simply steps his king up. If he moves his king to e5, he pushes the f pawn, and one of the pawns promote, right? So, black just maintains the opposition, trying to force the king back to the 7th rank, right? So the white king moves over. Well, at least that looks like the correct move, but it's not, because watch this. If black heads for the pawns, then one promotes, right? If black plays rook to g6, we have this, right? Wrong. We come back to the same situation, right? The correct move for white in this position, if black plays g6, the correct move for white, wrong, because he checks the king, right? Now he threatens me, and just checks the king. That's a draw. So how does white win in this position? The correct answer is he goes back to the 7th rank. Now how is that possible? Because of this right here. He plans to support the pawn from e8, where he's not on the 7th rank, where black could just pin the other pawn. At this point, the game's over. But black still has one more try. But how does white win this? I hope you didn't say promote the G pawn. That's the correct answer. Thanks for tuning in to BK Academy.